was a sophomore at Carnegie Mellon University, I studied T.S. Eliot and I studied calculus. Well, T.S. Eliot has made it to Broadway and calculus hasn't. But I must confess that when I was in college, I would not have been surprised if calculus had made it instead. For at that time, I thought that the poetry of Mr. Eliot was every bit as arcane as calculus. Upon returning home from seeing a performance of Cats, I opened my sophomore textbook, Chief Modern Poets of England and America, and I saw written in the margins of those pages notes that make no sense at all in a hand I do not recognize. The rum-tongued tugger is a curious beast. His disobliging ways are a matter of habit. If you offer him a fish, then he always wants a feast. When there isn't any fish, then he won't eat rabbit. Well, here are my notes. Rum-tum-tugger and beast are underlined, and in the margin beside that line I wrote, Lion of Judah. Beside the line, if you offer him a fish, then he always wants a feast, I have written, Miracle of Loaves and Fishes. And scribbled in the margin beside the line, when there isn't any fish, then he won't eat rabbit, there's a note to the effect that Catholics don't eat meat on Fridays. Well, on Broadway, T.S. Eliot's Cats appeared to be pretty uncomplicated. I wondered if at Carnegie Mellon I, or my teacher, Dr. John Hart, had been reading a bit too much between the lines. Dr. Hart was one of a group of professors who met once a week and read and discussed a single page of Ulysses by James Joyce, and I was, God forgive me, a sophomore. Well, after finishing Rum-Tum-Tugger, I continued reading the textbook section on T.S. Eliot, and I found the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I remembered liking that poem for its rhythm. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. I will spare you what I had written in the margin besides etherized upon a table. As I continued reading, I stopped trying to decipher my notes, which were marginal in both the literal and figurative sense of the word, and I began to read the poem straight through, and I found myself saying, yes, I understand, and yes, I don't. Not no, I don't understand, but yes, I don't. Saying yes, I don't understand is a privilege that comes either with religious faith or old age. At last I came to these lines, and indeed there will be a time to wonder, do I dare and do I dare disturb the universe? And a little later in the poem, these haunting lines appear. I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. In South Florida, the trousers may be polyester, but I have seen them walk upon the beach. In South Florida, those trousers may have an elastic waistband and be part of a lady's three-piece pantsuit, but I have seen those trousers rolled. I have seen them on tired women and on retired men. I have seen old men with their hair parted just behind the ear with a few thin strands stretched across their pate. I have seen them, men and women, walk along the beach and not dare to eat a peach, or a slice of red roast beef, or drink a cup of undecaffeinated coffee after 4 p.m. And I wonder, when does caution become reason? And I wonder, did any of these men, did any of these women ever ask, do I dare disturb the universe? Who does ask, do I dare disturb the universe? And who does disturb the universe? Kings did, and politicians do. The Wright brothers did, and NASA does. Martin Luther did, and John Paul does. Sigmund Freud did, and Dr. Ruth tries to. Rachel Carson did, Ralph Nader did, Betty Friedan did, Shakespeare did, and so did Michelangelo. Mozart did, and so did Picasso. Any creative act in some way disturbs the universe. A few great works of art change all the works that follow. No one who paints cannot not know the Sistine ceiling, and no one who composes music cannot not know Beethoven. even if that person has never seen the Sistine ceiling, and even if that person has never heard Beethoven's Fifth. Michelangelo and Beethoven are there somewhere. They tore up the ground they walked on, and they changed its contours, and even if we do not know whose footsteps we are following, we are walking over prepared soil. We are beyond having a universe in which there is no Shakespeare. If we are to discover what it takes to plow up the universe, let us examine the lives of some men who did. Let us track the lives of 3 men who disturbed the universe so profoundly that none of us in this room today can conceive of our universe without thinking of their disturbances. These 3 are men of science, and their work has dealt directly with our physical universe. All 3 are mega men of science, and they are, in order of appearance, Galileo, Newton, and Einstein. I have chosen them for 2 reasons. 1, their disturbances are so profound that they are beyond value judgments. That is, we need not question the merit of what they have done, as some might question the merit of the work of Sigmund Freud or Karl Marx or Charles Darwin, at least even in the Florida legislature. And 2, their accomplishments are so large that they allow us to examine and blow up details that we might miss in lesser lives. So let us go then, you and I, and examine the steps between a peach and the universe. First, Galileo. Galileo was born in 1564, the year that Shakespeare was also born and the year that Michelangelo died. When Galileo made himself a telescope, one which is on display to this very day in Florence, he discovered the moons of Jupiter. When he published his findings in a book to which he gave a beautiful title, The Starry Messenger, a Florentine astronomer proved that the satellites of Jupiter could not exist in the following way, quote, "There are 7 windows given to animals through which the air is admitted to the tabernacle of the body, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, 2 ears, and a mouth. From this and many similarities in nature, such as 7 metals, etc., we gather that the number of planets is necessarily 7. Moreover, the satellites of Jupiter are invisible to the naked eye and therefore would be useless and therefore do not exist." That was the mindset that existed in Florence when Galileo lived there. Galileo again turned his telescope toward the heavens, and he discovered something worse. Copernicus was right. The Earth by dam revolved around the sun, not vice versa. And here his real troubles began. The Pope, Urban VIII, said that Galileo left no room for miracles. Monsignor Riccardi, the chief censor of the Roman Catholic Church, said that Galileo was being blasphemous. Had not Solomon written, "The earth abideth forever, the sun also riseth, and the sun goes down, and hasteth to his place whence he rose"? And wasn't Solomon writing God's words and Hemingway's future titles? Well, Galileo had an answer. He said, "The Bible shows the way to go to heaven, not the way the heavens go." But that answer was too wonderful, too witty, and it only made things worse. Remember, at this time the Catholic Church was still reeling from the effects of the Reformation. It was the time of the Inquisition, and no one, especially the chief censor, could be accused of having a sense of humor in church matters. But Galileo desperately wanted to publish, so he and the chief censor worked out a compromise. The chief censor said that Galileo could publish his findings if he agreed to write a preface that he would submit to the chief censor for approval. And in this preface, Galileo must qualify his theories as dreams, nullities, paralogisms, and chimera. So, in 1632, Dialogue on the 2 Chief World Systems was published. The 2 world systems being the Ptolemaic, that the sun revolved, and the Copernican, that the earth did. And Galileo lived up to his part of the agreement, and he published his work with a disclaimer as advised and as approved by the censor. But he did 2 other things wrong. First of all, he published in Italian, not in erudite Latin, and thus made his work accessible to all. And second, he wrote beautifully. He was a gifted writer of exposition. We call it nonfiction. And then, on top of all this, the quality of the research was so powerful that it proved Copernicanism beyond a doubt. It was like publishing a paper with a preface saying that the color red does not exist, and then printing the entire text in red ink. So Galileo was called before the tribunal and forced to deny first weakly and then more and more vehemently the principles of Copernicus. Finally, the judges said that he could not be absolved unless he declared that he abjured, cursed, and detested his past errors, and Galileo did. The normal sentence for such heresy was imprisonment, but the Pope commuted this to house arrest on the condition that Galileo repeat once a week the 7 penitential psalms, and Galileo did, and never talk to any Protestants, and Galileo did not. And that is what happened to you in the year 1633 if you dared to disturb the universe. But was it really disturbing the universe that mattered so much? Was it really troubles with the universe that caused such profound troubles for the man Galileo? Please remember that he was born in the same year that Shakespeare was. We all know that in 1633, when Galileo got into trouble, England had been Protestant for 100 years. But Galileo wanted to publish in his neighborhood, not Shakespeare's. If he had chosen to publish in a country just a little farther north, say Germany or Holland, he would have met with far fewer problems. Even Venice, an Italian city, but one with a freer and looser society, would never have troubled him the way that his own neighborhood did. Between a peach in the universe, there is the neighborhood. And for those who dare disturb the universe, must first have the courage to disturb the neighborhood. It takes more courage to disturb the neighborhood than it takes to disturb the universe, and the price is often higher. So between a peach in the universe, we have the lesson of Galileo, that it takes more courage to disturb the neighborhood than it does to disturb the universe. In the very year that Galileo died, Isaac Newton was born into Protestant England, where the neighborhood was friendly to science. It is here in the person of Newton that Galileo's work would be extended, and it is from the person of Isaac Newton that we can see what, besides daring to disturb the neighborhood, it takes to disturb the universe. The year in which Newton was born was important, not only because his work started where Galileo's left off, it did, but also because having been born in 1642 meant that in 1665, Newton was ready to start graduate school at Cambridge University. And that year is significant because 1665 was a plague year. By August of 1665, 1/10 of the population of London had died of the plague. So in September, Cambridge called off all its classes, school was closed, and its students were sent home, Isaac Newton among them. Home to Isaac Newton was a small stone house in Woolsthorpe, where his mother lived and where it is supposed there was an apple tree. Newton was devoted to his mother and she to him, but there was no one at Woolsthorpe with whom he could discuss his intellectual achievements. There, in those 2 plague years, 1665 and 1666, Newton formulated his 3 great laws of motion: inertia, gravitational attraction, and action-reaction. Developed the laws of pendulum motion, worked out the inverse square law, proved Kepler's law of planetary motion, developed the mathematical treatment of wave motion, worked out the main irregularities of the moon's motion, explained the tide, showed that comets are members of the solar system, showed that the density of Earth is between 5 and 6 times that of water, and figured out the precession of the equinoxes. He also conducted experiments that led to important discoveries about the refraction of light and the nature of color. Not bad, but wait, there's more. As a mathematical tool to help himself solve the problems he was working on, Newton invented differential and integral calculus. He called his invention fluxions. He invented something else as a tool. Just as Galileo was witty, Newton was handy. When he was studying light, he ground his own prisms, and when he was studying the stars, he invented the reflecting telescope. The reflecting telescope, and Newton along with it, came to the attention of the Royal Society of London for the Promotion of Natural Knowledge, known as the Royal Society. And it was at the urging of its president that in 1687 his major work, the Principia, was published. The People magazine part of me makes me need to tell you that the president of the Royal Society at that time was none other than Samuel Pepys, the diarist. And the book itself was financed by Edmund Halley of Halley's Comet fame. The travel guide part of me makes me need to tell you that his telescope is on display today at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. Most of us, I think, would have been proud to have claimed the invention of the reflecting telescope or the invention of calculus in those 2 plague years. I, for one, would have considered it an accomplishment to have mastered the use of calculus in 2 years. I certainly didn't do it in 2 semesters of college. There's an awful lot about Sir Isaac Newton that People magazine could have feasted upon. He was petty and mean, wise and generous, a mystic and a civil servant. But the aspect that I want to emphasize, the aspect that I think all who are interested in disturbing the universe must know about, is the ability to profitably survive a plague year. I don't mean physical ability, I mean mental ability. I mean mental agility. I mean those who would disturb the universe have a need for solitude. And that, I think, is the second step between a peach and the universe. The ability to be alone profitably, to enjoy solitude with vigor. Like Newton, Einstein was isolated from other physicists at the time he published his first paper on relativity. He was working as a technical expert, 3rd class, in the patent office at Bern, Switzerland. And like Galileo, Einstein also disturbed the neighborhood. In 1933, Philip Leonard wrote in the Nazi paper, quote, "The most important example of the dangerous influence of Jewish circles on the study of nature has been provided by Herr Einstein with his mathematically botched theories consisting of some ancient knowledge and a few arbitrary additions. Even scientists who have otherwise done solid work allowed the relativity theory to get a foothold in Germany because they did not see how wrong it is to regard this Jew as a good German. It is unworthy of a German to be the intellectual follower of a Jew. Natural science is of completely Aryan origin, and Germans must find their own way into the unknown. Heil Hitler." By 1933, Einstein had disturbed his neighborhood to the point of personal danger, so he left his native Germany and moved to Princeton, New Jersey. Shortly after moving there, he wrote to a friend, quote, "Princeton is a wonderful little spot, a quaint and ceremonious village of puny demagogues on stilts. Yet, by ignoring certain social conventions, I have been able to create for myself an atmosphere conducive to study and free of distraction. Here, the people who compose what is called society enjoy even less freedom than their counterparts in Europe. Yet they seem unaware of this restriction since their way of life tends to inhibit personality development from childhood." In that single statement, Einstein summarizes for us that courage to disturb the neighborhood and a need for solitude, points 1 and 2 between a peach and the universe, feed each other. Do I dare ignore the neighborhood? And do I dare demand solitude? It is Einstein who directly reveals the 3rd ingredient that is necessary if a person dares to disturb the universe. He said, "When I examine myself and my methods of thought, I come to the conclusion that the gift of fantasy has meant more to me than my talent for absorbing positive knowledge." Einstein made that comment in a conversation with Janos Plech about the similarities between writing fiction and working mathematics. And thus, this man of genius kindly makes a perfect transition for me today, speaking to you about the creative process applied, as I know it best, to the writing fiction. For the 3rd ingredient between a peach and the universe is the gift of fantasy. As a writer of novels for middle-aged children, kids between the ages of 8 and 12, I have been concerned with each of these steps between A Peach in the Universe, for neighborhood, solitude, and fantasy are not only what it takes to make me write, but they are also what I write about. For neighborhood, solitude, and fantasy are the concerns of children aged 8 to 12. Let me start with fantasy. Fantasy often enters into the actual story I'm telling. From my very first book, Jennifer Hecate, Macbeth, William McKinley, and Me, Elizabeth, there has been at least one element of let's pretend in each of my books. My newest book, Up from Jericho Tell, begins, there was a time when I was 11 years old, between the start of a new school year and midwinter's night, when I was invisible. I was never invisible for long, and I always returned to plain sight, but all my life has been affected by the people I met and the time I spent in a world where I could see and not be seen. I indulged a favorite fantasy, being invisible, when I wrote that book. But beyond that, I hope that I give my reader a sense of suspending disbelief, a sense of fantasy. Every now and then I get a letter that tells me that I've done that. Here's one such letter. It's dated September 18, 1970. Dear Mrs. Konigsburg, my name is Elaine Petrovsky, and I am 11 years old. I think that's a sensible age, don't you? I live in Ontario, and have read your books called About the B'nai Bagels and From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. I thought both of them were delicious, and I ate them up in my mind, and now and then the taste comes back to me. When I get a letter like that, I know that even the most realistic fiction not only fills a need for fantasy in the reader, but also feeds solitude. As Elaine Petrovsky put it, I ate them up in my mind, and now and then the taste comes back to me. Fiction makes solitude rich. Fiction makes solitude taste good. The need for solitude had also been one of the concerns about which I write. It was a concern with the need of a suburban child to have time alone that most directly prompted my writing about the B'nai Bagels, one of the books that Elaine Petrovsky mentioned. About the B'nai Bagels is the story of a young boy, Mark Setzer, who is a middle-class suburban and whose time not spent at school is spent preparing for his bar mitzvah or at Little League. When his mother becomes manager of his Little League team, even his playtime is invaded, and when she appoints his big brother Spencer as his coach, poor Mark can't escape his family at all. I think that we would say that his family had invaded his space. I closed that book with my young hero, Mark Setzer, solving a moral dilemma, having his bar mitzvah, and then this last paragraph. Mark is speaking. According to Hebrew law, now I am a man. That is, I can participate fully in all religious services. But I figure that you don't become a man overnight, because it is a becoming more yourself, your own kind of tone, depth, center fielder, son, brother, friend, bagel. And only some of it happens on official time plus family time. A lot of it happens being alone, and it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes a guy a whole Little League season. Even if you do appreciate solitude as Mark Setzer comes to, it's not always easy to come by. The need for solitude gets no respect, especially if you are a woman experiencing that need. An American woman, an American suburban woman, a married American suburban woman, a married American suburban woman with children. Do you ever wonder, as I do, where it is written that wives are instantly available to find the second section of the newspaper, even if she was not the last one to read it? Do you ever believe, as I do, that children come with a gene that says that it is mothers and not fathers who are instantly interruptible to unstick zippers? Do you ever think, as I do, that a plague year would be welcome if it meant a year without a call from that aluminum siding lady? Aside from these interruptions, there are forces acting on us women over which we have no control. I think of a study done several years ago on nurses living in a dormitory in Denver. Within a year of their living together, all their menstrual periods, which initially had been weeks apart, fell to within a few days of each other. When I mentioned that remarkable implications of this to a young friend who was in college, living in a co-ed dormitory, she said, "That's strange. The same things happened to me and my friends." I don't know if it also happened when I lived in a college dormitory, because I went to college in an age when no one ever dreamed that tampon commercials would appear on TV and cigarette commercials would not. Periods were mentioned in public only as the full stop at the end of a sentence. But do you wonder, as I do, if women were not meant to have solitude, but were meant to be part of a pack for some communal, territorial, arena-stomping male selection process? It makes one think. But if given a choice, I would rather have an unsatisfied need for solitude than have no need for it at all. Einstein once said, "Perhaps someday solitude will come to be properly recognized and appreciated as the teacher of personality." The Orientals have long known this. The individual who has experienced solitude will not easily become a victim of mass suggestion, unquote. The art of being alone with vigor is a talent. Like all talent, it must be developed, and if the Orientals develop it more, some cultures develop it less. That this is so became apparent to me a couple of years ago when I was in Texas and met a man, a retired Navy man, who was seriously indulging his love of history, particularly Texas history. There's no history in the United States more wound up with that of Mexico than that of Texas. Long after the evening was mellow, the man asked me a question that I could not answer then and have difficulty answering now. His question to me was this: why, since the 60s, whence there has developed a broad acceptance of minority cultures in the United States, why, since there has been a body of children's literature produced by Oriental Americans, by Black Americans, by Native American Americans, why has there been no work, let alone a body of work, produced by Mexican Americans? There are books about them, but there are no books by them. At that time, I pleaded with him that although I write books for children, I am not and have never claimed to be an authority on them. But when I asked an authority, she came up with one. Aurora Labashida wrote the text for the picture book 9 Days to Christmas, published in 1959. I've given a lot of thought to his question since he asked it, and I have asked around, and I have learned that life in Mexican-American United States is a life in the neighborhood, and a life of the neighborhood. Life with a kind of togetherness that is almost unknown outside the barrio. A kind of life where living is done in groups. Women visit while shopping, watching television, going to the laundromat, eating. The child never has a chance to develop a talent for being alone. The barrio is protection, but it is also a prison. It is as sweet as a marshmallow and as hard to punch out of. How can a person disturb the neighborhood if it is always upon you? How can a person disturb the neighborhood if a person never learns to be solitary? How can a culture produce disturbers of the universe if it never unleashes its members from the neighborhood? How can a person think about disturbing the universe if that universe is always, always filled with talk and with doing and playing? There must be solitude, and there must be something to feed that solitude, and I believe that books should. Certainly books are a more alone, a more one-to-one activity than television. Thus, books enrich fantasy and books enrich solitude. By one of those wonderful organic paradoxes, it's equally true that fantasy and solitude enrich books and make possible the writing of them. Writers need to dream, and writers need to be alone. For I'm convinced there can be no creative process without fantasy and without solitude. And I'm equally convinced that a writer, even if he is not writing about the earth encircling the sun, even if he is writing fiction, must have the courage to disturb the neighborhood. Thomas Wolfe could not go home again to Asheville after writing Look Homeward, Angel. And I know people in New Jersey who still will not speak to Philip Roth. And I know a town in Vermont where a Nobel laureate lives because he found out that it's easier to disturb Mother Nature than to disturb Mother Russia. As a writer of fiction for middle-aged children, I have often addressed the need to disturb the neighborhood. There's no time in a child's life when the question, do I dare disturb the neighborhood, is ever more pressing than when he is in grades 5 through 8. For that is the time when children are being pulled by their peers on the one hand and by the core self on the other. To illustrate my concern with grabbing the courage that it takes to disturb the neighborhood, I'd like to read you excerpts from a story called With Bert and Ray from my collection of short stories called Throwing Shadows. William is telling the story. It begins, if I have to start at the beginning of things, I guess I would have to start with Pa, or the end of Pa, I should say. I had long ago heard the expression of someone being dead drunk. Well, that was Pa, or the end of Pa. He died dead drunk when I was 6, and that was as many years ago, half my life ago. For a long time before he died, he couldn't get anyone to sell him any more insurance, and I can't say that I blame them. Anyway, the little bit he did have didn't hardly pay for his funeral, and the little bit that Ma got from Social Security didn't hardly carry us from 1 month to the next. So what Ma did after Pa had been dead for 3 years and we had some powerful dentist bills mounted up was to sell off all his stuff, guns and duck decoys and Jim Beam bottles. Wasn't any of it she wanted anyways. Two of the people who came to the sale were Bert and Ray, this couple who have an antique store over in the section of town called Huntington. Bert and Ray were kind of thrilled about the duck decoys and the prices Ma had put on them. They sure did tuck them decoys under their arms real quick and paid Ma exactly what she asked for them and gave her a card saying that she should please to call them whenever she did another house sale. Ma took the card and said that she sure would call them if she ever did another. I was speculating about what Ma could sell until I realized that Ma is just a timid soul who says, "Excuse me," to the chiffonier when she bumps into it. Well, soon William and his mother are over in the Huntington section of town for their dental appointments, and as they're waiting for the bus, William notices that they are right at Bert and Ray's shop. William takes the initiative and makes his mother pay them a visit. Shortly afterwards, William's mother gets a call from Ray asking her if she would like to handle a house sale for them. Ma said sure she'd like to help them, not even knowing what was in it for her, but she wanted to thank them for having her and me to tea. She asked Ray if I, William, could help too. I guess she figured that I ought to since I had had some tea too. And Ray told her yes, that certainly William could help. The sale turned out real good. We cleared out that whole house full of stuff and made $243.38 for our work. And that was the start of our career in managing house sales. Business is good, and William and his mother begin upgrading their household by buying things at fair market value from their estate sales. And Bert and Ray begin upgrading their business by traveling to far places to buy fancier antiques. Then William continues with the story. Ma and me came to see how the hardest part about antiques is finding them and buying them at a good price. Selling them is pretty easy, except for some things, and those things aren't necessarily the ugliest. Sometimes ugly sells real good. It depends on the style of ugly. Ma had gathered together a little library of books, and she didn't never do the pricing if Bert and Ray were around, and if they showed, even by a quick look in their eyes, that they wanted to keep in practice. Ma always let them because she told me that she didn't want to hurt their feelings none, and she didn't want to give them the idea that she had forgot from whence all her new career had sprung. One day, When Ma and me were invited over to Bert and Ray's for tea, they had just come back from a buying trip up to Kentucky and some other horse country, when Ma spotted this piece of furniture leaning by the wall that leads to their parlor. And Ma went on over to it and studied on it a while and said, "I just love your panettiere, Bert. Wherever did you find it?" "Panettiere?" Bert said. "What panettiere?" "That there cupboard," Ma said, pointing to the piece of furniture leaning against the parlor wall. "Listen," I said. "Ma called it a panettiere." Then Ma looked at the ticket and said, "I see that you all made a right good buy, a right good buy." Ray came in from the kitchen just then, and Bert said to him, "It seems to me we made a good buy on our panettiere, Ray." And Ray said, "Our what?" "Your panettiere right there," I said, pointing to that same cupboard leaning against the parlor wall. Ray got real upset. I know he did. So did Bert. They smiled, both of them did, but I could tell. I peeked back in the door after we left, and I saw them pulling that tag off that there panettiere, which they didn't even know they had till Ma called it to their attention. Next week, Ma and Bert had Bert and Ray over to supper, and Ray announced, "Bert and I sold our panettiere to Mrs. Sinclair. She's doing everything in French, and we called her and told her that we had an authentic 18th century bread cupboard, and she didn't even know it was a panettiere until we told her. She bought it like that," he said, snapping his fingers. "Fancy that," I said. "A genuine 18th century panettiere, and Mrs. Sinclair didn't even know it." Bert said, "Well, some of these people who have big houses need to be educated in good taste." Ma just smiled and told them how glad she was that they had turned a nice profit. Well, William and Ma get a call to handle the Birchfield estate, where they find a Chinese silk screen. No one buys it at the sale, and Bert and Ray even make fun of it, saying that it's a piece of junk. William's mother, convinced that it is something fine, buys it from the estate for $125 and takes it home and studies it. She becomes increasingly convinced that it's something special. William takes Polaroid pictures of it, and during his class trip to Washington, D.C., he makes his way to the Freer Gallery where they indicate some interest. So when school is out, William and Ma load the screen onto their station wagon and go with it to the Freer. Her asking price is $20,000. I'll let William finish telling it. When we'd been back home 8 days, we got a telegram from the museum saying that the committee had voted to purchase the screen. I called up the newspaper and told them, and a writer from the newspaper came on over to the house and listened to my story and published 2 of my Polaroids besides, not even complaining that they were a little out of focus or that they had fingerprints on them in the wrong places. We must have got 100 phone calls the day the story come out in the paper. I told Ma that what I couldn't understand was why Bert and Ray hadn't called us up to congratulate us. A lot of other dealers had. Ma said that she understood why they had not, and she was feeling pretty sad about it. I asked Ma if she thought that they was jealous about the money. Ma said that the money was just a little bit of it. "What do you suppose is the big part of it then, Ma?" I asked. "It's hard for me to know the words for saying it, William," she said. "I know what it is that's bothering them. It's the same thing that bothered them about the panettiere, but I don't know the psychological words for it." Bert and Ray finally called the next day, and I heard Ma say, "It seems like I got took pretty good, Bert. I found out that there screen I sold to the museum for $20,000 was really worth $25. Guess I just still got a lot to learn." Well, that was it. Bert and Ray come on over to the house that night and teased Ma about how she got took, and Ma just laughed at herself right along with them. Well, that was it. Bert and Ray just couldn't stand being beat out by Ma, who had been their student just a few years ago. Bert and Ray couldn't stand it that Ma already knowed more about antiques than they did, and not only because she studies on them, but also because she's got all these delicate feelings about things that you can't hardly help but notice when you watch her looking at something or touching it so gentle. But Ma's been so wore down by everything, including living all them years with Pa, that she figures won't nobody love her if she shows she knows one thing more than they do. But I look back on how good she stuck by her guns with that scream. And I figure that if she can stand by her gun with strangers, she soon will be able to do it with people who have us over to tea. And I figure that I got 6 more years before I finish school and have to go off and leave her, and I'm going to work on her. I pushed her up them steps to Huntington Antiques, and I got her to go to that museum, and I'm sure that I can help her to find out how being grateful to Burton Ray is something she should always be, but outgrown them is something she already is. By the time I leave home, she's going to be ready to face that fact and live with it. She'll need it, being she won't have me to push her here and there anymore. Well, this story was sparked from my reading an account of how the Metropolitan Museum of Art acquired its polychrome statue of St. John the Baptist by the Spanish master Juan Martinez Montañez. It appears that there was an antique dealer who could not sell the piece out of her shop. So she packed it into her station wagon and took it to New York City, and the museum bought it. It is a beauty, and if you happen to have the 1981 Metropolitan calendar, look at the page facing February 1st, and you'll see a statue that Mildred Centers sold to the museum. Mildred Centers lives in Jacksonville, Florida. So you see, my immediate neighborhood is the background of this story about disturbing the neighborhood, step 1 between a peach and the universe. Before my time to ask, do I dare to eat a peach? I want to ask, do I dare to dream? Do I dare enjoy my solitude? Do I dare disturb the neighborhood? And if I do, and if I dare, I may write a book about someone who does, or I may write a book that does, or I may disturb the universe. Thank you.